30-year-old Darren Spencer, who was from Merseyside, had chosen to give up his freedom and instead spend the next 7 years in jail after the drug dealer had festered his aggression, his rage, let it build up to the point where he was about to implode, and then blade his dealer and mate Connor Mutch outside his home in Litherland, Merseyside, over 15 times, including back, chest and face. It was a miracle that Connor Mutch was not K'd. The frenzied action was no accident. This was pre-planned after the two got into a disagreement, and again Darren Spencer had very real intention to K. According to reports, 30-year-old Darren Spencer had anger issues, and he was said to have been easily wound up, which made his paranoia that much worse. So on the date of the blading, Darren Spencer and 26-year-old Connor Mutch had got into what was classed as a disagreement over a £25 debt that Darren had owed Connor. Now Darren was famous for owing people money and not paying it back. Now Connor had provided Darren with Class A, white from time to time, and the two men often met up and drank and used together in order to pass time and just relax. So during the drink and drug binge session at Connor's flat on Crosshay in Litherland in the early hours of the morning on April 17th, Darren had refused to pay the £25 debt. Darren was said to have become increasingly heated and annoyed and agitated after Connor refused to be quiet about it. He kept going on, "You owe me £25, you owe me £25, when are you going to pay it?" And also a broken window. This was ruining Darren's much needed buzz. Now because Darren had refused to acknowledge the debt and the disagreement turned into a full-blown argument and the broken window issue, Connor told Darren to leave his home. Darren did. However, Darren was left fuming, agitated and raging. Darren had felt disrespected and felt as though Connor had no right to talk to him like that, especially as Connor was younger by a few years, 4. So, while the rage festered and built up in Darren, made worse by the white and drink, Darren had got into his head that he was going to teach his dealer mate a lesson on what you can and can't say to a real gangster, a real bad person. So Darren returned to the flat in Crosshays at an estimated time of 8 AM in the morning. Now he was equipped with a blade and already had committed himself to either seriously harming Connor at the very least or taking his life at the very worst. Darren had used his strength to force his way through Connor's front door. Stunned to see Darren, Connor leapt up at the sound of his door being juddered off its hinges. The two men then scrapped right there at the front door while Connor tried to physically force Darren back outside. Now Darren Spencer reacted by landing a jab and a hook at Connor, target area the side of the head and then square on in the face. Next, Darren Spencer, who was still high, had pulled out his blade and then started to poke, jab and swipe at Connor. At the show of metal, Connor quickly recoiled and stepped back, created distance between the pair. Darren, whom had the upper hand, could see the fear in Connor's face. Now Connor was then pursued around the flat and into the communal garden, where a council employee was said to have packed up his equipment and left a few minutes before the pursuit. A deranged and frenzied Darren, who was completely unhinged, closed the distance between himself and Connor, and then began to blade Connor repeatedly, a total of 15 times, again, and again, and again, back, chest, arms, and face. In the feral incident, Darren had made contact with Connor's lungs and then it opened up. Connor crashed on the grassy area, struggling and gasping for breath, and red leaking multiple areas. Darren, who was completely sinister, took a moment to watch his mate, his dealer and now his victim, gasping. Darren knew Connor was in a bad way, so Darren ran and just left the scene. Thankfully, a member of the public had seen Connor and dialed 999. They quickly requested both police and ambulance to attend the scene. Ambulances were dispatched and then they were blue lighted to Crosshays and made it there within 14 minutes. Emergency services worked on Connor, who was in a communal garden still. His injuries were plugged and Connor was rushed to Entry Hospital, where he had to undergo surgery for the collapsed lung. Now Connor, who has an 11-year-old, thankfully survived the incident. but his frame, including his face, was left scarred, something that's a constant reminder of his life as a dealer and what came with it. Again, Connor had let this man into his home, someone he trusted, and this is how Darren Spencer had repaid him, over a debt of £25, which Connor was owed. Now, Darren was already known to the police as he had been jailed multiple times, and his crimes included robberies in both 2011 and 2014. He'd also previously been caught with a blade, and also being caught with a blade in public when he put it against a cyclist when Darren demanded money off them, a complete stranger. And in a separate incident, Darren had fallen out with an ex-girlfriend's mom, and the mom had demanded that Darren pay back their daughter the £200 in which she was owed. Darren told the mom to stay out of his business, and rather than paying off the £200 debt which he owed, Darren Spencer decided to promise to blade the mom after pulling out his trusted blade. And in another separate incident, Darren was part of a three-man gang whom had chased and then ambushed an off-duty police officer. That officer was swarmed and pummeled after calling the officer a grass. And most recently, Darren broke the jaw of a person whom he was supposed to be caring for because the victim had asked for his medication. He broke the jaw and also the nose. Ironically, when Darren was arrested, he had already prepared a pre-planned statement in which Darren says that he was in fact the victim and how Darren was forced to grab for the blade and use it after he himself had been ambushed. I personally think that Darren had forgot that he had gone back to Connor's address and also forced himself through that front door. It was only when Connor tried to force Darren back outside of his home, Darren reacted by landing a jab and then using the blade. But again, 15 times is excessive. In court, Darren's defence team did their best to get their man off by saying there had been a 9-year gap between some of the crimes committed, which showed that Darren Spencer, who is from Merseyside, was capable of leading a law-abiding lifestyle with help. They also says that Darren Spencer had once again turned to drug when sadly he found his mom dead. He also said that during those times Darren Spencer was barely coping, and it led to the overwhelming feelings that he could not process and understand. He found himself head of the family now, as he now had to be responsible for looking after his younger brother. Now, the solicitor also added that Darren Spencer wanted to be a better person. However, appearing via video link at H&P Liverpool, the judge jailed Darren Spencer for 7 years and 3 months for wounding with intent and also making promises of violence with a bladed article. There's also a restraining order in place put on Darren for 16 years. The judge also commented on the incident by saying that you armed yourself with a dangerous blade before inflicting repeated blows with the blade towards sensitive parts of the body. You have a repeated pattern with crimes involving blades. The shocking incident in which the victim had been bladed 15 times, it was sheer luck and fortune that Connor was not Cade right there on the communal grass. So, as always, does the crime match the sentence? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe.